New digital technologies are driving a step change in enterprise business transformation. At the Digital Twin Podcast, we explore the intersection of technology and business. What should your digital twin look like?
We're in the zone, live. Thank you for joining. Hari and Omar, here again. Thank y'all for joining. As you can see, today's topic is about Agile. Is it here to stay?
Or is it to be replaced?
That's a good question, right? I mean, when we talk about Agile, the methodology and the project management of software is really the genesis of where this is all coming. People try to evolve the agile methodologies into different applications outside of software, and I think to some extent it may have been successful in certain applications, but in some it just doesn't fit, right? You know.
Doesn't.
But I mean, when we think about agile, where did it come from, right? I mean, what is it really about? What's the core of agile? I was looking up the other day what agile really means and the genesis, and you can kind of start to say, you know, how do we change the way we used to do things to the way we think we are today with agile? Because it seems like agile is in the current. If that's a fair assessment.
It's been around for 20 years now, right?
And
Close to.
and I mean, are we seeing a change? Is there anything different about what's happening? I mean, what do you think, Hari?
I think it may be best to even talk about why agile, right? And why that really took this much of a momentum. And we all know, I think maybe for some of our listeners, maybe not so much, right? I think it was driven a lot by how quickly you can respond to changing requirements as opposed to the previous methodologies, right? How fast you can deliver and how transparent you are from a delivery perspective. And I think mostly, IT organizations have been using that, right, from a software delivery perspective. But, you see that in many different project approaches as well. But I think it's for certain types of projects, though, right? I think you and I had this conversation. Not everything might fit, right?
Yeah, I think it's the core genesis of what it's about, right? If you just look at, if you just do a simple search on what agile is, and I think if very top of the page manifesto of agile, right? If you just look at it, individuals and interaction over process and tools is one of the pillars, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what are we really saying there? That are we empowering individuals and teams over a certain way of how we used to do things and tools that are have been there for years, maybe 20, 30 years before, right? I
Right.
mean, and how that whole shift of the power within the individuals and teams can oversee the process and tools, and does that allow for creativity and innovation? I would agree that it probably does, but does it also lead different tracks, right? Different focus. The word focus is important here, right?
Yeah.
Can you quickly get out of that focus if you're not careful, being agile and shifting and letting individuals and interactions constantly shift ideas and direction sometimes, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
one of the fundamental principles, right?
Right. And also faster delivery, right? It's getting to the end goal faster and taking many iterations to get there, right?
Yeah. So I think it's one of those pieces, right? And if you think about how the other piece of this work in software over comprehensive documentation is another key component of that. Well, I mean, when you think about that pillar, what does that say? I mean, what do you think that means?
So
Work in software.
my take on that is, of course, to me, you have no clarity in the end goal, right? I mean, we may have clarity in the objective, but you may not know exactly what that end product looks like, right? And it takes collaboration, it takes the iterative workflow, it takes a little bit of that teamwork to get to that end product, and constantly requirements are changing. So the finished product is also changing, right? And during the course of the project, the what the end product is, or is going to be, will change.
So are you saying that what a customer wants today may be different tomorrow, a week, or a month from now? The ideas might be there, the focus might be there, but it just may just evolve into
And it
something.
depends on the project, right? I mean, there may be a project that has a clear deliverable, and it's straightforward, it's direct, and there are no changes in the expectations, and you can get there, right? And we may not need that sort of approach. But when today's world with SaaS, for example, right? You start with a minimum viable product. You're testing the for the product market fit. You're trying to quickly take that feedback and iterating a better version of it, right?
So
On
so
the go.
so you're saying that you develop the product, make a better version of it to the point where they'll pay the price point that you want? I mean, is this what the ultimate thing is? We're trying to develop something that they will buy
I
and
would hope meet
use.
the requirements, right?
So if you're saying that if you can meet the requirements, but it's, it can be a requirement could be out, is a requirement something that they will be willing to pay a certain price for too, right? I mean, there's something just to develop and create different products and meet the requirements. Yeah, like I'm gonna go meet it and deliver it, but are they gonna continue to use that, or am I gonna have to get to the MVP 2, 3, constantly iterate it? Where does it
Yeah,
end to the price point that is
that's a good point.
desirable for a business model? Because that's the core of what we're talking about, and people are believing in the agile methodology. But again, that agile methodology creates an iterative process that continues to change away from maybe what you really thought your business model was in the very beginning. So just because you're iterating and changing that, the development and what's going on with that product line or that eventual business line, that changes your whole focus again.
Hmm.
And the idea is we're going to keep going until the customer wants it and wants to buy it. But then again, you're chasing something without really understanding what the business model is going to look like. And this is where
Well,
this is where it gets really tricky, right? I mean, it's a customer collaboration and responding to change. It's that other three pillar. The
it's a
other,
balance,
it
right? If you,
is.
on the flip side, if you make something that the market doesn't want, or you're too late to the market with something, either you're not able to break into the market because it's too late, that someone has already acquired the market, right? And there isn't enough for you, or that the market requirements have changed, and you need a better, different product. It may not be a better product; it may be a different product.
So you start from
I've seen that
scratch.
happen in my lifetime.
I think so. I think,
Yeah.
as you start to identify where you want to go. So you have it's an assumption, right? You have a scientific method that, hey, we think this is what the the market will love, and we start getting that first viable product to really figure out what they really want, right? And constantly iterate, and hopefully that they like it so much that you stop at, you know, at at toll gate 3, right? And
Or
you
you
can
run out
start
of money.
collecting. You run out of money, right? I mean, that's really the game, right? Keep going till we get the cash coming in, right? I mean, that's really the game.
Yeah.
And I think
But it's
to
a collaborative process.
it
I
is.
think the more likely scenario is when you go through the first or second iteration, you actually know the pace at which you're going, the direction you're going. You almost have a good feel for what this project is headed towards. I think you may pull the plug, right in the beginning, and say, you know what, this is not worth it. I'm out.
Well, I think maybe that is a big advantage of agile, is that
Yeah,
before you decide to put a whole program in place to develop one very focused piece, you're able to iterate and be able to pivot and move
yeah.
things and
Cut
have
your
a
losses.
better shot of that investment that you're trying to, whether it's a startup trying to build an organization, or whether it's a product enhancement or market that you're trying to bridge into with, some of these technologies. You're not sure. You're not sure what's going to work. You have good assumptions. Let's go test them out. Let's agile it out, right?
Fail fast.
Fail fast. And maybe that's part of the theme of it, right?
Yeah, cut your losses and move on to the next best investment.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Keep your
'Cause
time and focus. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's one area where, you know, I think nowadays people are somewhat trying to challenge some of the methodologies, and going back to some traditional, waterfalling or different techniques where it's a little bit more controlled environment. And maybe what you start to see is the development, the agile development becoming more outsourced, meaning that organizations just want to have the environment for people to be agile. You go find customers, but hey, we have the right platforms, the right environments for you to be successful. It's all up to you. Go and collaborate with a customer that you want. We have the tools to help you do it. Agile it out. Go. Right? I mean, it's there today, right?
Verb, right? Agile it out. Scrum it out.
Scrum it out. Actually, that's what I'm talking about. But it's there. It's there today. And, I think it's a unique capability, and it's a unique opportunity for a lot
So
of.
what have you heard in terms of the negatives? I'm sure we all have friends that are developers and in really living this day to day. Any negatives you've heard?
Well, I think, if you're running agile development, customer collaboration is important, but I think having that understanding that this is an agile process, because it is a culture and a rhythm that sometimes customers aren't accustomed to, because sometimes they just want the product delivered and they got it. Oh, I'm not here to help you develop it. You should be already ready. The collaborative process is a little bit of work for the customer. So when we talk about effort and the agile methodology, we're talking about customer effort or client effort to collaborate with the developers to develop something that they may want and maybe at the end pay for.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. What about focus, do you think? I think you mentioned earlier on, right? There is this constantly pivoting or possibly speeding up, slowing down, changing directions. Is that a cause for concern from a focus perspective, or for those who are actively involved?
Well, I think it can be somewhat, right? But again, sometimes the customers may not have focus. Maybe they have a lot of free time. We come back to even from the digital transformation point of view, right? What are some of the initiatives? What are the use cases? Where are the value drivers? Where's the ROI? Is software and technology going to help me get there? Is that alone going to help me? If it is, then how does it need to be? If it's going to get me 50% of the way there, what does 50% look like? And what does the rest of my organization that interacts with this software need to be, right? From a UI point of view, from an experience customer perspective point of view. So you have to kind of start working to what is going to marry the real value for that customer, and budget. You can't escape that, right? It's not, these aren't projects that are going to last forever, right? These aren't going to be focused.
This isn't science experiment.
This is an experiment, but this is kind of how it's portrayed to be like, hey, let's experiment, fail fast, and see if you like it.
Right.
And to some extent, that can be successful, but at some times,
again, it's a balance.
It's
and
a balance
for the right type of project. One thing that I've heard about this is, with Agile, you have a meeting to plan another meeting.
Oh, so it's like a
way too much iteration and planning. And so,
is that part of the process? Do you have meetings to understand to keep everybody on track? Is that what this is about? Because it seems like you're giving the autonomy and flexibility, but you need to somehow bring it in,
So I
corral it.
think we didn't really talk about it. What's after life after agile, right?
Oh,
I think the direction really is what you just talked about. There is a perspective that there isn't enough freedom, and there needs to be more of a self-organized groups rather than this much restrictions that are placed on these groups, right? And so um, is it just agile practiced incorrectly, or is it just agile gone wrong in a certain
was it?
type
Is
of
it hard to
project?
manage? Is it hard to manage?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about. Is it
Does it
hard to
scale well?
manage this? Does it scale?
Does it
That's
scale?
absolutely correct. And I think for some organizations, you know, these are, I call them tiger teams or whatever you want to call them. They're the 8 teams that are doing this, but everybody else, has to kind of somewhat, whatever the resources you're using have to be used effectively, right? Because with agile, sometimes you're saying, yeah, we're iterating, we're creating, but is it really, how many times are we failing? What's going on here? Why do we keep, we don't got anything that hits, right? And I think it's evolving, right? It's evolving. And, I think the key thing here, you said balance, focus, and a little bit of autonomy with some of the right people can create a unique environment. I think you're starting to see a lot of this with some of these data science tools, with ML and AI technologies. You're starting to see the tools and frameworks around that to somewhat help solve and create interesting solutions around problems, which is a benefit to the actual individuals and the teams that are trying to solve these problems, because not everyone needs to be a software developer, not everyone needs to be a project manager. You can bring in a group of people to kind of help solve problems from a data point of view, from a software point of view, from an SME point of view. So when you start to bring these teams together, you're really focused on certain problems, and it becomes that the keyword
Yeah.
focus. And you have the balance, right? You have the data
Yep.
science, you have the software, but you also have the SME knowledge, and
Yeah.
you might want to have somebody in there to really justify the ROI. So this is the balance that's needed
And
around
I think
this.
I think you're making a great point, because most people know about the application of agile in IT, right? I think you're talking about stepping outside of the world, solving business problems in a setting that is different than what you would find in a typical software development sort of environment, right?
Absolutely.
Software development might be involved, but you're talking about multiple different skill sets brought to the table to solve potentially a business problem.
And I think that's where they've thrown the business problem on a software development to solve, right? This is the
That's a
tradition.
good point.
So they throw all the problem on software development to solve, but in reality, it's a it's a component. It's a
Mhm.
tool that is to help the overall solution of the problem. And I think that's where a lot of the constant failing, trying to get software developers to develop something that's so perfect so that somebody doesn't have to really, you know, really automate something to an extent that it takes multiple
Yeah.
iterations to get to, right? When in reality, maybe there's a balance of saying, hey, I need the software to give me A, B, and C because I have the rest here locked in. If they can just do this, I can handle the rest. And maybe we can work on the rest later, but let's get to that first MOV right here, right? So this is a different methodology, thinking, focus, balance, different core sets that I think can, enhance the agile methodology, but maybe evolve into something a little bit different. Maybe agile is a component of something bigger, right?
Right. Something that can scale better,
Yeah.
something that can be self-managed, something that is, possibly, one of the ways it's been described to me is, you want, larger organizations to be existing in smaller groups, right? Smaller, self-functioning, almost organisms that
Mm-hmm.
are coexisting, almost like a symbiotic relationship, rather than creating a large structured team based agile structure, something that evolves to scale. you know.
Yeah, and I think as time goes, organizational structures, culture, all that, we hit about this a lot of it, but a lot of these things are intertangled in the way you do things, the way we do
Right.
business, the way we innovate, the way we create. And I think that's one thing that we shouldn't lose sight of. And I think this is where when you look at a lot of engagements where people are not successful, maybe they're failing a lot, is because they're missing the other components of that balance, right? Of the culture piece, and how is that going to integrate into our current,
Yeah.
system, and are we going to reject that, or are we going to, embrace that? And maybe it's a mix, right? But how do you manage that mix, right? So
Right.
now you're
Hmm.
starting to address the adaptability and how you adopt it into your overall culture and change management. And
And I think that that transparency that we talked about goes a long way in that, adaptability, right? Knowing what's coming, knowing what's happening, knowing what the status of this is, and being participative in what they're doing, right? You're involved, you're actively involved right from the beginning, not 12 months later you get something dropped on your lap and say, hey, now this is yours, you can use it, you know you're
yeah,
involved, you're in a collaborative state. And so that's a great point to make.
being
But
part of the
one
process, right?
is in
Yeah.
part of the process, and that's key to some of the things we talk about around adoption and scaling within the organization. But one other key point that we mentioned, I think we should add to that 2 points, is the fact that business value drives the whole
Why are we
the whole
doing it?
project, right?
Why are we doing
What's
it?
the purpose? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think with that, we'll get into one of our next segments, but I know we're coming up on time here. But I think that's a great way to finish because all of this is great methodologies, great balances. But at the end of the day, it's got to drive value, and without that
Absolutely.
clear component or the clear vision of value, why are you doing it, right? And we'll leave you with that, everybody, for our next episode next week on why are you doing this in value. And we can discuss different ways and use cases where you can align a few of these things together and some examples of what makes sense, what's been successful, and where some of the pitfalls are. With that, Hari and Omar signing off. Thank you all for joining.
Take care. DigitalTwinPodcast.com. See you guys soon.